Welcome to Belmont Author Spotlight. I'm your host, Anne Marie Mahoney, and today I have with me Julie Wu, who is the author of this book, The Third Son. Welcome, Julie. As we were talking earlier, warming up a little bit, this is really a fascinating story, both because it's grounded in real history, but also because you created such amazing and interesting characters.
Thank you.
But before we get into the book, let's start with you and your story. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into writing.
Well, I grew up in this area. I was born actually at Mount Auburn Hospital.
All right.
And I grew up in Lincoln. So I had a very all-American upbringing in a lot of ways, very uneventful. And, growing up in a mostly white, wealthy community. So, but I always was interested in my parents' stories about Taiwan. They had immigrated in the 50s and 60s, and they told us a lot of stories about their upbringing and about Taiwan that really had no corroboration in the media that we had. Like, there was nothing in books that really described the real history of Taiwan when I was growing up, because at that time a lot of the stuff was censored. So I always had this interest in what they were saying and trying to find out more about Taiwanese history and try to explain to people what Taiwan was, because there's a lot of confusion about it.
Right.
And so I always had that sort of urge to learn more and also to educate what I as much as I could. And so I went to Harvard as an undergrad and majored in literature, but just basically because I just love to read. I didn't really have any plans other than that. And I think that I tried a little bit of like maybe creative nonfiction, but that was really the limit. And I think at Harvard I was just like, I wanted to take a fiction writing course, but you had to apply and like submit something, and I didn't have anything to submit. And and there were people who were like really already published who were there, so I was just like intimidated or something. But it was really like after I graduated, and I had I tried to write a few things, but they were not very good. And it was really like in 1989 or so when I just had this. I was at my parents' house and I had this vision in my head of like a little boy in Taiwan, and I went to go write that scene down. And so then I think that was the first inkling that I had of what writing could be like, that it wasn't just like, because I think previously I was like, oh, I'm going to write a story, it's going to be about blah, blah, blah. But in this case, I was just like, oh, this is like you have a vision, like a world in your head, and you're like describing it. So that was like completely different. And so like at that time I was singing. I was going to, so I went to graduate school in vocal performance, actually, at Indiana University in Bloomington.
Nice.
So while I was there, I took a fiction writing workshop, and that was fabulous. So because I had I had already started trying to write this boy into like a novel, and so I took this workshop and I was trying to write this book at the same time, and I was talking to my parents, because that was the only way that I could get like real history about Taiwan, because what I found in the library just wasn't accurate. So but then I ran into some roadblocks because my parents didn't know as much about the history beyond what they remembered as like 12-year-olds.
Right.
And I just I just felt like I needed to know more about life, and I felt like I needed to explore different ways of thinking, or just like learn more. And and I also wasn't getting where I wanted to go with voice. So at that point I like switched and I went to medical school.
Oh, geez. Well, that is a switch.
Yeah. So that was a whole like different, life experience for me.
Sure.
And I'm, like also at medical school, I did also take a fiction workshop there. I was at Columbia, and that was probably my favorite medical school course. was like
Fiction
was like not, it was not in the medical school, but and it was really sort of after that. So so that was really great for my development as a writer. And then so a couple of years later, so I came back to Boston, did my residency at the Deaconess Hospital, and I got married, had a kid, and at that point I was like, I really, really want to write this book. I wanted to come back to this. I didn't quite have the whole framework in my head, but I just I needed to do more research. And at this point, there was free speech in Taiwan, and so there was this influx of information and now there was the internet as well, and the internet actually, I could access a lot of information. So I sat down with my parents, and I was like, okay, now I'm going to really interview you guys. And I think this, sort of getting over my adolescent not wanting to write about my parents thing, at this point I was like, okay, I want to hear your story, And then I sat down with my dad, and he was like, well, what do you want to hear? Where should I start? When I was a baby? And at first I was like, oh, that's stupid. We should start when when you were coming to the U.S., right? But I was like, sure, start when you were little. And then he started revealing for the first time that he'd actually been abused, that he had actually very unhappy childhood, lonely childhood, and that it was my mother who had gotten him to believe in himself and gotten him to believe that he could actually, come to the United States and pursue graduate education here and make a life here. And so then I realized this is a great story,
Absolutely.
So, yeah. So then I started writing the story kind of based on their lives, and after a while, I had to make changes because that, I think that there's a couple different routes I could have taken. I could have just written it as a memoir, or as nonfiction, or novel form. I think that for me, I felt like I always loved novels, the immersive nature of it, and I didn't really feel that I had a personal story of transformation that would really make it a memoir work. So in order to make this a book that would appeal, I think, to the general public, that would sell, I decided that I would novelize it. And really, it took me a while, but I had to sort of embrace the fictional aspect of it and make changes in the story to make it, cohere as a novel. So that's really kind of the whole genesis of it.
Well, that is fascinating.
Yeah.
And I'm so interested to hear your own academic journey before you got to this, which is wonderful. And I'm sure each little piece of that contributed here, in various ways.
Yeah.
I think the reality of your parents' story, I think that authenticity comes through in the characters and how they come across to the reader. I mean, there is a reality to them and a grounding, and you do become captured by them. You're reading the book and you're rooting for them. You're saying, yes, listen to her. She's right. Go to America.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad that you.
But at the same time, there is the reality of the history of Taiwan, end of World War II, late 1940s, and then as it moves forward into the 1950s, and how that enmeshes a little bit with what was going on in the United States. I would assume in terms of McCarthyism and the rise of communism and how we dealt with that at the time. So you have that kind of balancing act. And I will say, as I was reading it, particularly going back to World War II, I'm going back to my high school history classes and thinking, oh, right, I'd forgotten the Japanese, the Chinese. Okay, now I get it. So that, I think, again, that really grounds the story. And you're saying, well, this is real. This is something I can depend on. And how are these characters going to navigate this?
Yeah, well, that was really important to me, to convey the history and the sort of context, the context of modern Taiwanese history, because people really don't understand in this country. I mean, I think all they hear about is like the Taiwan Strait and like the
Right.
relations between Taiwan and China, and
Right.
they don't really understand why they are in conflict, or like what the whole deal is with that, or like really what is Taiwan and who lives there. Like I think there really is like sort of a mystery, and that hasn't been helped by the fact that there was all this censorship during the martial law era in Taiwan. So I did want to write something that would elucidate that, and I felt that writing a novel was really a good way to do that, because if you write a history book, like nobody will read it.
Right, it's all those pesky footnotes, and it's like, who wants to read that?
Nobody wants to read that. And whereas like, if you just write a good story, I mean, people will just want to read that. They'll just like, make the personal connection, and so actually, this book was the first like American, or the first like English language novel that described the February 28th incident.
Yes.
So, which was in 1947. So, and that was like a seminal incident in Taiwanese history. So that was important for me to describe that. I mean, I think that as I said, like the free speech didn't really come to Taiwan until 1992. So quite late.
All right.
Quite recently, I should say.
Right.
So it was at that time that I was able to get some research material. Like there's a famous book by an American diplomat, George Kerr, called Formosa Betrayed, where he describes, he was there at the time during the February 28th incident. And so I got this book, and actually I was explaining to my parents what happened, because their only exposure to the February 28th incident was as 12 and 11-year-olds being like, told to stay inside, and they would hear things, but it's not like, I mean, it was forbidden. It was forbidden to talk about it. Like it was verboten, really. I mean, like you would go to jail if you talked about this incident. So they didn't really know what exactly had happened.
Actually happened.
Yeah,
Right.
and and they didn't really know. Like they heard that there was some island where people were sent, political prisoners, but they didn't really know where it was or the details or anything.
mean?
So like I was telling them what happened. So
Yeah.
it was kind of interesting.
Well, and the subtleties in the book of, I have a Japanese name and I have a Chinese name.
Yeah.
And when am I using each? And the whole education system. I found that fascinating.
Yeah.
How you were able to access higher education of some quality or not.
Right.
How people were in fact repressed, and how hard it was to jump ahead and get that kind of education that allowed you then to move forward in a good way.
Right. Yeah. So a lot of people don't realize that Taiwan was a Japanese colony for 50 years. So my parents grew up speaking Japanese and thinking, in fact, that they were Japanese.
Okay.
So it was very,
Interesting.
so it was like quite confusing. I think in the book he describes like his confusion when the Japanese left after World War II, and then suddenly it's like, okay, now forget.
Who am I?
That's right. Forget your Japanese name. Don't speak Japanese anymore. Now you have to speak this new language, Mandarin Chinese, which you also didn't know. And like, surprise, this is your new name.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting. So so I grew up with my parents. Like they still do their arithmetic in Japanese, because that's how
That's
they
how they learned it.
Yeah.
Exactly. Wow.
Yeah, but they also speak Mandarin Chinese. But then at home they speak Taiwanese, which is a dialect of Chinese.
Sure.
So yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
in English, of course.
Right. So it's all fascinating. Thank you.
Yeah.
Now let's shift us. So that's sort of the background.
Right.
That's setting the table. That's the historical background, all of which is real. Now you get into the characters.
Right.
And as they develop, so you start with Saburo and Yoshiko, excuse me. When they are very young. I
Right.
think we first see them at like age 8 or 10.
Right.
And then we follow them along.
Right.
At that point now, you're describing and exposing the culture and the family traditions. Speak a little bit about that, because as you're reading some of it, to an American in the 21st century, it's very distressing. The way your destiny is almost determined by your birth order, particularly for the males.
Yeah. Well, I think, I think it's common in many like old traditional cultures.
True.
And I think that, particularly, and I think particularly, in that culture and particularly in Saburo's family. So like, for example, like when he meets Yoshiko, I think that's like his glimpse of like a family that that isn't like that, where there is like sort of love and support. And so that's like his window into like a different world.
Right.
Because for him, it is like, it's just very rigid. Like his older brother gets all the favor.
Yep.
And then he's, for some reason that he doesn't understand, that he never quite, understands, like he's just always just like less than, and treated as less than, gets less food, gets less favor, less love, less everything. So so I mean, some of it is cultural, some of it is just familial, so and I think that's probably true in many cultures, in many families. People may just have excuses for the way that they treat people differently.
True.
So,
and then you have sort of the dichotomy of his family. The dad is politically active. He's holding political offices, and what that means for their family, and what that means for the dad, and how he is treated by others. Whereas then Yoshiko, her family are merchants. They own a pharmacy. They're working. Everyone works in the business. That sort of thing. Two very different backgrounds.
Yeah, I mean, he's so Saburo's father is more like a collaborator figure.
Yes.
So he's a politician. He's very savvy. No, he's a survivor. He's trying to
shifting.
Yeah, so he's trying to do whatever it takes to keep to keep successful within the different regimes.
Right.
And he is, he has his good sides and his bad sides, So I mean, he's sometimes not nice to Saburo. At the same time, sometimes he saves him. So
yes.
So it's sort of a complicated. He's sort of a complicated figure. And then on the other hand, Yoshiko's father also is kind of complicated because he has his issues too. But he's also like, he's not going to compromise as far as politics. Like he refuses to take a Japanese name because under the Japanese, if you took a Japanese name and basically pretended that you were Japanese, you would get favor. You would get Japanese rations,
right.
And you would get higher ranked jobs and things like that. And he refused to do that. But he has his personal foibles as well. So
right.
So there's sort of a contrast between the two families. Yeah.
Interesting. Talk a little bit about the older brother, because he becomes, at least for me, he becomes the character you love to hate.
Yeah.
I mean, there are no redeeming qualities there. Spoiler alert, older brother's tough to deal with.
Yeah. I mean, he's, but he also, I mean, I have some sympathy for him because he's also he's under a lot of pressure as the oldest son.
As the oldest.
Yeah,
right.
He's supposed to fulfill, all of the parental expectations, and so I mean, he is the older brother. That's sort of the competitor, also the oppressor.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So. Yeah.
Yes, and sort of devious, dastardly.
Yeah. It's true. It's true.
Yes.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit then about, given that, the role of education. And we see it in how these characters are able to access higher education and quality higher education or not. One false step and you're out.
Right.
But then how ultimately Saburo is able to access what he needs to get to the United States and then really flourish, but through very hard work.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that I describe in the book is just how rigid the educational system was. That really, one misstep like because it's all by examination.
Yes.
And so like you have to get into the best middle school, to get into the best high school, to get into the best college. So you're like pressured from an early age to to do well in these exams, and if you mess up, then you're off the track.
Right.
So like you're
And
stuck.
there's no redemption.
So there's no redemption, and then so coming to the United States, that's kind of a chance. That's like his chance at redemption, because like the people here, they don't know what school you went to.
They don't care.
They have no idea. They don't even know like whether you went to a college or a junior college. They don't know those things. So,
Right.
And it's basically and it's sort of just sort of a different. They appreciate different things, I think, and like that at least just in the context of the story and of like really like my parents' experience, really, that that the qualities that Saburo has that get him into trouble in Taiwan, like here they are viewed positively.
Right.
Like
right.
he's able to he doesn't shy away from authority. He doesn't just do what he's told. Like he stands up and he speaks for himself, and he's very aggressive in going out and finding things out for himself. Just like trying things out for himself, and that works very well in the United States
Yes.
for him.
Yes.
Yeah.
Did you research what was going on in these universities in the 1950s? I was so fascinated with his connection to University of Michigan, mostly because my dad went to the University of Michigan in the late 40s, post World War II on the GI Bill. And so I really read that with a lot of interest. But he's in multiple places.
Yeah.
And as a backdrop is the development of the space race between the United States and Russia.
Yeah, absolutely. That was all based on stuff that actually happened, like the International Geophysical Year,
Yes,
like that.
yes.
All that happened, and also so all this the space race, that was all based on research, and also the spy network of like the Kuomintang spy network, that was all based on
reality.
On reality, yeah.
Okay, I was wondering how grounded that was, or was that just a story feature?
No, absolutely.
Okay.
That's all documented, and there are whole books on that topic at the time. Yeah, it doesn't happen now. From Taiwan, anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, at the time, absolutely, there were people who from the nationalist government who would come and like pose as students, or they would recruit students, and they would to spy on people and to potentially blacklist people who were pro-Taiwanese independence.
Right.
And then they would get their family members in Taiwan into trouble. So.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, fascinating.
Yeah. Because I remember talking to someone. She was like, "You mean that was real?" She thought, "I thought that was,
Yeah, just made up." Well, that's it. I was kind of questioning, like, I don't know. I mean, it makes a nice device in the story, but did this really happen?
Yeah.
All right. Well, interesting that it does. So he escapes one kind of oppression to come here to find just this kind of invisible oppression that he has to watch out for.
Right. Yeah. So he thinks he's escaping, but he isn't really.
No, they're still watching him.
Yeah. So I mean, I want to hasten to add, for those who don't know, like that Taiwan did become. It's a freer democracy than the United States right now. So like the opposition party won in like 2000, like the presidency, and like they're completely democratic now, and there's no spy network from Taiwan now.
Okay, well, that's good.
but yeah, but just at the time, for sure.
All right.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Really fascinating.
Yeah.
Now, as I was reading, and I think I've alluded to the fact that you really get captured by the story, and at least for me, I did find features of it really disturbing or distressing, but that's the reality.
Yeah.
What do you say to people who find this hard to read?
Yeah. Well, this book is really all about overcoming oppression. It's about overcoming oppression on multiple levels. So, like in the family, in society, in the country, in the culture. So so yeah, so it is difficult, but it is also really about, resilience,
Yes.
you know,
Yes.
and growth. And so it's really about transformation, So I mean, in order to overcome oppression, you have to experience it first.
True. True.
And I think that a lot of people can relate to this kind of story, even if you don't grow up in an authoritarian country, but, just from whatever personal background that you have. Maybe it's just personal, personal dynamics or whatever, like overcoming and just like you're becoming more free, in your personal life. I
Right,
think
right.
those are all things that I think that anybody could relate to.
Well, and I think identifying a personal value and sticking with it. And I think this is where, as a couple, when they get married and eventually are both here with their child, they do kind of feed off of or support each other in that way, which is wonderful.
Right.
Let me also add that sort of one of the characters that I really enjoyed, minor role, but I really found quietly heroic in his own way, is Taru,
Oh, yeah.
the cousin who's the doctor, who's made choices in his life as well that leaves him where he is, but in his own subtle way, really working to support and free others.
Right. Right. Yeah, I'm glad you liked him.
I did. He's the best.
No, he's one of my favorite characters too, and actually he's in my second book too.
Oh, good. All right.
He's the only character who's in my
That
second
carries
book.
over.
Yeah.
Well, all right. Talk about then what comes
Yeah.
next after this.
Oh, sure. So, so I just completed my second book, which right now is called The Prisoner's Violin, and that, when I first started that, I started doing research for it in 2012.
Okay.
And it's really about sort of the next period in Taiwanese history, and it's more directly about the people who stayed behind and the people who were instrumental in the transition to democracy. So I went in 2012 to interview former political prisoners who were incarcerated on Green Island, which is that island that they sent all the political prisoners to. So my thought at the time was, oh, well, now I've written a book, so I know how it goes, and it'll be really fast this time.
Yeah, no,
But
no.
12 years later, 13 years later. So, but yeah, so that book is, I mean, my intention was to show it more from the like I said, from the dissident point of view. And also, I kind of based it in a way on Les Miserables.
Oh,
so,
all right. Okay.
But with a little bit of a twist. So, there's like a the story is about the main protagonist probably is a woman who is the daughter of political prisoners who were killed, and then she's being brought up by nationalist people, and then somebody is like a friend of her parents is released from prison and then goes to this is sort of Jean Valjean type character.
Yeah.
So he goes and finds her and sort of triggers this political awakening in her.
Okay.
So that's kind of the story.
The theme.
And that's set in 1979 to 1980, which is when the Kaohsiung incident happened, which is a watershed incident for the transition to democracy. So this book was really the first one about the February 28th incident, and that one, I mean, I haven't read any other novels that cover the Kaohsiung incident, so that's my intention to talk about that, because I mean, it's very complicated, just because I was always interested in, like, how did Taiwan transition to a democracy, like from an authoritarian regime, like a very strict, repressive regime, into a democracy, and like how did they do that? And it's very complex. So Yeah.
Well, this has been fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing all of this with us. We look forward to the next book.
Thanks.
You definitely will finish it soon. I know you will. You'll get it done. I am here with Julie Wu, author of The Third Son. Absolutely go out and get this. It is fascinating. All of you students studying American history or World War II, get this because it's got some great stuff in it. Thank you so much for joining me, and I look forward to the publication of the next book so you can come back.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
You're welcome. This has been Belmont Author Spotlight. Thank you.